For those of you who don't remember, you'll be forgiven for not remembering. 4 weeks ago was the last time that I was here, and we started a mini-series, and we started because we knew that Beth and I were going to be gone for 2 weeks on our cruise, so you don't want to have several weeks interrupting a series that you're doing. So I was going to just do a 2-part series on the book of 2 John, and then it snowed. And so we put 3 weeks between this series in order to avoid putting 2 weeks between another series. So didn't really work out how it was planned, but hey, either way. Last time we went over the first half of the book of 2 John. We talked about who the author of the book of 2 John is. Strangely, that is controversial to some people, but it is the Apostle John. He calls himself the Elder. A lot of things that could be wrapped up in that title. John, likely the last living apostle at this time, so he's the last person on earth who has the authority to write Scripture, and this might be a title to kind of say, hey, this isn't to be received as a letter, this is the Bible. We don't know that for sure, but it's at least something interesting. We talked about who the elect lady is. Some people say that she represents a church. Other people say that it's a literal person. I tend to believe that it's a literal person, especially if you compare it with 3 John, how he talks to Gaius, or Gaius, however you want to pronounce his name. It's almost exactly how he talks to this lady here. So we talked about that. Then we also talked about why the book was written. John says that he wrote it for the truth's sake. He tells them that he exhorts them to continue in the truth. And he says that he basically gives us the foundation for Christian unity and Christian fellowship. He says the elect lady who he loves in the truth. And we talked about how the fact is the reason we have fellowship and the reason we have unity is because of our common love for the truth. We don't have to have the same hobbies, the same interests, the same things that we enjoy doing, but we have unity here because we all love the truth. And that's the basis of Christian unity and Christian fellowship. And that's important to remember as we go into the second half here, because the other reason he writes this book is to combat growing heresy. And the idea is we have unity in the truth, and we don't have unity with those who don't love the truth. And that's what we're going to get into today, beginning in verse 7, because we stopped last time at verse 6. I'm going to read through here, and then we'll jump into kind of going verse by verse through here. Verse number 7, John says, "For many deceivers are entered into the world, who confess not that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh. This is a deceiver and an antichrist. Look to yourselves that we lose not the things which we have wrought, but that we receive a full reward. Whosoever transgresseth and abideth not in the doctrine of Christ hath not God. He that abideth in the doctrine of Christ, he hath both the Father and the Son. If there come any unto you, and bring not this doctrine, receive him not into your house, neither bid him Godspeed. For he that biddeth him Godspeed is partaker of his evil deeds. Having many things to write unto you, I would not write with paper and ink, but I trust to come unto you, and to speak face to face, that our joy may be full. The children of thy elect sister greet thee. Amen." All right, so verse number 7, he starts off and he says, "For many deceivers are entered into the world." And I wonder if anybody remembers from basically last year, if you remember the group of deceivers that I said he's referring to here. Does anybody know? You know? I think Matt probably knows. Very specifically, he kind of gives us the clue here. He says, "Who confess not that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh." He's referring to Gnosticism. It was a growing idea that came up around the time when John's writing here. Gnosticism, we talked about several weeks ago, basically they believed what's called dualism. Matter is inherently evil, and spirit is inherently good. And one of the main heresies of Gnosticism was because matter is evil, they claimed Jesus could not have had a physical body, because that would make Jesus inherently evil. and obviously God can't be evil, so they had to have some sort of workaround. They had two different ways they would try to explain this. One type of Gnosticism said that Jesus just appeared like he had a body, but he didn't actually have a body. And John combats this in 1 John when he says, that which we saw, that which we heard, and our hands handled. Meaning, we physically felt him, we touched him. You know, Thomas touches his hands, his side. Like, they're saying he physically was there. And the other type of Gnosticism was the type of Gnosticism that said that the Spirit of Christ came on this human Jesus at his baptism and then left just before the crucifixion. So it's kind of strange, but John also combats that when he says in 1 John that it's the same Jesus who came by water and by blood. In other words, the same Jesus that was baptized is the Jesus that was also crucified. Same one. So John combats Gnosticism in 1 John, and he continues it here in 2 John. And my paper keeps wanting to turn itself, so I'm going to put my phone there. But that's why he says, the deceivers are gone into the world who confess not that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh. These are people who deny the doctrine that God the Son took on human flesh and was born and lived a perfect sinless life as fully God, yet fully man. He says that this is a deceiver and an antichrist. Now, this is not the antichrist. That's entirely different. There is the antichrist and there are antichrists. You know, are there like Freudian slip motions? I don't know. Anyway, this is not the antichrist. It is antichrists. But John talks about this in 1 John chapter 2, verses 18 and 19. We're going to be there later, so I'm not going to take the time to go there now. But there are antichrists, people who are against Christ. And then there is the antichrist. That's a more eschatological thing. We're not going to get into that. So about Gnosticism, if you remember several weeks ago, I said that I was going to share with you a little bit of Gnostic writings so that you can kind of get a feel for this. One of the reasons why is because Christians are often accused of leaving the forgotten books of the Bible out, and mainly people are referring to the Gnostic Gospels, is what they're called. They're books written like mid-2nd century or later, which would be mid-100s or later. And if you already knew that, you know more than Dan Brown, who wrote the Da Vinci Code. Because he, talking about the Council of Nicaea, which was 325 AD, said it was the 3rd century. That would be the 4th century. So anyway, but the Gnostic Gospels are written mainly mid-2nd century or later. Now here's the thing. I'm gonna give you a couple sayings from what's called the Gospel of Thomas. It claims to be written by Thomas the Apostle, who died in the 70s. So you can do the math. We've got an issue right off the bat here. But it claims to be these secret sayings that the living Jesus spoke to Thomas recorded. That's what the book claims to be, which is it's kind of funny. But I narrow in on this particular one because if you're going to hear someone say that Christians have left books out of the Bible, this is probably the one they're going to point to. At least they're going to point to it first. But they're hoping that you haven't actually read it. I have read the entire Gospel of Thomas, and, well, here we go. One thing I do want to point out, though. Apparently, whoever wrote this book did know their Bible, or at least knew it enough to twist it. And it's important, I want to say this, it's important that we know what the Bible says, and that we know real good doctrine and that we are very founded in our faith, because there's some people who know the Bible enough to twist it and confuse people. The Gnostic Gospels confused a lot of people. Not as much Gnosticism nowadays, but there was a lot of people who were deceived by this kind of stuff. And a lot of it is because you can see that they knew some of the Bible. Let me give you an example here. The Gospel of Thomas is sayings. It's not like chapter verse. It's not like a narrative or anything. It's just like saying this, saying that, just random sayings of Jesus or these random scenes. Here's one, saying 17. It says, Jesus said, I will give you what no eye has seen, what no ear has heard, what no hand has touched, what has not arisen in the human heart. Does that sound familiar? It's almost exactly what Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 9. I have not seen, ear hath not heard, nor has entered in the heart of the man the things which God has prepared for those who love him. It sounds very Bible-like. It sounds like this is the Bible. This one I kind of chuckle at. Saying 71, Jesus said, I will destroy this house and no one will be able to build it. Little off, because Jesus said, destroy this house and he will raise it up. This is referring to his body being the temple there. But it's very close, sort of. Saying 86, Jesus says, foxes have their dens and birds have their nests, but human beings have no place to lay down and rest. Again, very close, but definitely different. I think we'll move on from there. There's some talk about like this light entity, which sometimes you think is referring to God. I'm not sure. Sometimes it says like, for example, we have come from the light, from the place where the light came into being by itself, established itself, and appeared in their image. I'm not really sure what this is referring to, but you're going to run into a lot of things in this book that you're not going to really understand what it means, like this one. When you are in the light, what will you do? On the day when you were one, you became two. But when you become two, what will you do? Anyone got an interpretation for that?
That one almost sounded Seuss-like.
Yeah, it sounded like Dr. Seuss, right? And the funny thing is, this wasn't written in English, so that was completely by accident.
Will you be like on a plane?
When you're on a plane, when you're on a train, what will you do? Anyway, but here's one thing I want to help you with. Telling this is not the Bible is not very difficult. Let me read a couple things for you. Saying 7. Jesus said, lucky is the lion that the human will eat, so that the lion becomes human. And foul is the human that the lion will eat, and the lion still will become human. Yeah, think about that one for a while. It's real deep, right? Saying 12, the disciples said to Jesus, we know that you're going to leave us. Who will be our leader? Jesus said to them, no matter where you are, go to James, for whose sake heaven and earth came into being. Just go to James. It's all good, guys. Just go to James. I don't know what we're supposed to do now because he's dead, but just go to James. And for whose sake heaven and earth came into being, which, if I remember my Bible, I thought that was for God's sake and for his glory and his pleasure, but okay, James it is. Here's one that kind of gives you the Gnostic feeling, though. It says, saying 15, when you see one who is not born of woman fall on your faces in worship, this one is your father. Remember, matter inherently bad, so if you see someone who isn't a physical human, not born of woman, that's the one you're supposed to follow, because matter bad, spirit good. I'm going to do just two more, because I need to get to other stuff here, but saying 103. I'm sorry, this one I have to crack up. Jesus said, congratulations to those who know where the rebels are going to attack. They can get going, collect their imperial resources, and be prepared before the rebels arrive.
What, did that just talk about the rebels and the empire? Is that what it just said?
It sounds like, this is where George Lucas got Star Wars from.
The rebels fighting the empire.
Congratulations to those who know where the rebels are going to attack. This is the actual Gospel of Thomas. This is a more modern translation. There's an older translation, but this is.
So it's like the Peanuts version of the only.
No. It's a faithful translation, but yeah. Now here's my favorite one. This is the last saying in the Gospel of Thomas. It's saying 114. This is Finn. Saying 114. Simon Peter said to them, "Make Mary leave us, for females don't deserve life. Now, if you think that's crazy, listen to supposedly Jesus' response. Jesus said, "Look, I will guide her to make her male, so that she too may become a living spirit resembling you males. For every female who makes herself male will enter the kingdom of heaven." Ladies, you know what you got to do. Now, here's one thing I want you to understand. We can laugh at this, and it's really funny. There's something called the Jesus Seminar. It's not good. But they claim that the Gospel of Thomas has more authentic quotes of Jesus than the Gospel of John. And those are the people that make it onto the History Channel. Those are the people who you're going to hear cited as if you're witnessing to someone and they're saying we left books out of the Bible, those are the people they're going to cite. Because but the thing is, no one ever read the Gospel of Thomas and then made that accusation, because it's not hard to tell this isn't the Bible. But anyway, this gives you kind of a feel for what Gnosticism was like. This is the kind of stuff John's combating. False books of the Bible, false teachings, and it's all denying the doctrines, the true doctrines of the Bible. By the way, if you're wondering, interesting little fact here, the idea of the perpetual virginity of Mary, which is a Catholic dogma, comes from a Gnostic gospel. I think it's something about Isaiah. I forget what it's called. But anyway, there's a part in this Gnostic book where Mary has baby Jesus and he's just beamed out of her belly. It's very Gnostic because, he didn't have a physical birth, all that sort of stuff. But here's the thing. That even Roman Catholic apologists will point to as the first mention of the perpetual virginity of Mary, because she couldn't give birth, because that would have physical effects on a woman's body, and she would no longer be a virgin in certain senses. So that's what they point to. It's a Gnostic writing, very Gnostic writing, like strange stuff in the book. That's where some of their dogma comes from. Just an interesting side note. But this is what John's talking about. He's saying, they confess not that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh. Then in verse 8, he says, look to yourselves that we lose not the things which we have wrought, but that we receive a full reward. John's first warning when it comes to combating heresy is, number one, look to yourself. Guard yourself. Not first of all, go charging into battle. First of all, check yourself. Make sure you're not being deceived by this. Make sure you know right doctrine. Make sure that you are walking in truth. That's the first step in combating heresy, is making guard for yourself first. But then he says that we lose not those things which we have wrought. Now, and it says, but that we receive a full reward. There's a couple, I don't have time really to get into. There's two different ideas of what he's talking about here, about losing a full reward. It's either losing some of your reward in heaven when you're rewarded at the end, or not going to heaven at all. It seems to me in the context that he's talking about losing a full reward, meaning departing from true doctrine of Christ, indicating that you weren't actually saved to begin with. Here's what John says. He says, look to yourselves that we lose not the things which we have wrought. The things that John and the apostles and all the people had wrought was the true doctrine of Christ. And they had at least professed faith in Christ. But if they depart from it, you'll see in the next verse, he says, whosoever transgresseth and abideth not in the doctrine of Christ hath not God. He's saying, look to yourself that you're not departing from the doctrine of Christ, because if you're going off and you're wrong about who Christ is, the fact of the matter is you're not saved. And the full reward is, full doesn't always mean percentage. It can mean quality. So what he's saying is, if you're wrong about who Christ is, you're not getting the reward of heaven. But here's where we go from there. He says, whosoever transgresseth and abideth not in the doctrine of Christ hath not God. He that abideth in the doctrine of Christ, he hath both the Father and the Son. I remember Brother Dubish a few weeks ago, he was preaching and he was talking about people who, if you're wrong about Jesus, you can profess faith in Jesus, but you're not saved. You can't be wrong about who Christ is and be right on salvation. Let me give you an example. Say I say Matt here. Matt loves My Little Pony. He's what we would refer to. He's what we refer to as a brony. Matt absolutely loves it. He loves it when deer run in front of his car when he's going 60 miles an hour, and he hits them with all the force in his entire vehicle, and it totals his vehicle. It's something he absolutely loves. It's one of his favorite things. In fact, sometimes he goes out just driving. He'll drive into the woods just to try to hit deer. Matt's favorite color is a pinkish purple. That might be true. I don't know. Never asked. Now I'm kind of afraid to ask. But anyway, but you get the picture. I'm saying all these things, and this is Matt, but that's not who Matt is. I might say that I know who Matt is. I might say that I believe in Matt, but it's not Matt. The same way, if you're wrong about who Christ is, you might say that you believe in Jesus, but it's not Jesus. It's not the same person. And Pastor mentioned probably several months ago now, I think it was Ligonier Ministries that did the survey, where 70-some-odd% of people surveyed said that Jesus was the first and greatest of God's creations. And these are people who claim to believe the Trinity, because 90-some-odd% of the people surveyed said they believe the Trinity. They're wrong about who Christ is. And John here says, if you transgress, which transgress here means to go beyond or to go outside of. If you're going beyond the doctrine of Christ, or if you're departing from the true doctrine of who Christ is, you don't have God. You are not truly saved. I want to show you what he says about this in 1 John chapter 2. I said we'd go here earlier. 1 John chapter 2. John says, "Little children, it is the last time. And as ye have heard that Antichrist shall come," that's the Antichrist, "Antichrist shall come. Even now there are many Antichrists." So there's your distinction. There's Antichrist and then there's Antichrists, singular and plural. Anyway, "Even now are there many Antichrists, whereby we know that it is the last time." Now, here's what he says about Antichrists, these people. He says, "They went out from us, but they were not of us. For if they had been of us, they would no doubt have continued with us. But they went out that they might be made manifest that they were not all of us." So here's what I want you to understand. People that depart and go off into these heresies about Christ and that sort of thing, John would never have argued that they lost salvation. He would have said they went out from us because they weren't of us. In other words, they weren't saved to begin with. So this is the argument he's making here when he says to watch for yourself, to look to yourself. He's saying the people who are departing from the doctrine of Christ, they were not saved to begin with. But you need to abide in the doctrine of Christ. Verse number 10 now comes to a bit of a practical question. He says, "If there come any unto you, and bring not this doctrine, receive him not into your house, neither bid him Godspeed. For he that biddeth him Godspeed is partaker of his evil deeds." And the question I've heard people ask is, well, does this mean that I can't, like if a Jehovah's Witness comes to my door, am I not allowed to bring them in, have a cup of coffee with them, and try to talk about the gospel with them? Because, it says, receive him not into your house. And they obviously don't bring the doctrine of Christ. They say Jesus is just one a God. He's not, they deny the Trinity, that sort of thing. So I can't have them in and try to give the gospel to them. Well, that's not really what John's talking about here. John is referring to what would be called basically itinerant preachers, preachers that would travel around to different areas and they would preach. Now, the thing is, the way that these preachers would be sustained, more or less, is the people in the churches around them would receive those preachers in, take care of them, give them a house to live in, give them food to eat, provide for their needs. So when John says don't receive him into your house, he's not saying you can't try to win someone to the Lord in your house. You have to go to their house, sorry. He's saying you're not providing for them. You're not trying to help them in their ministry. And then he says, nor bid them Godspeed. The idea of Godspeed is the idea of rejoicing with them or basically celebrating their ministry with them. So what he's saying is, when these people come through, don't support their ministry and don't try to encourage them to keep going. They are deceiving people. And if you encourage them, if a Jehovah's Witness comes to my door and I say, hey man, I'm not into your Jehovah's Witness stuff, but hey, I'm glad that you're preaching a moral life, and hey, go, keep doing it. Good job. That's bidding him Godspeed. That's encouraging him. And because of my encouragement, he might just keep going when he was about to quit for the day or something. And now I'm accountable for the stuff he does because I have a part in it. He's not saying don't accept someone into your house so that you can witness to them. He's saying don't provide for or give any encouragement to false ministry. But then he says, having many things to write unto you, I would not write with paper and ink, but I trust to come unto you and speak face to face, that our joy may be full. This is kind of neat. Just sometimes you see the heart of the writer, and just how much they care for people. John says, I want to come to you face to face that our joy may be full. John really cared for these people. He cared for this lady and her children, as I would believe, but even if you believe it's a church, he cared deeply for them and wanted to see them in person. We often get the idea that the biblical writers were these pious men locked away in some room just writing papers and never interacting with people. No. They had a deep love for the people that they ministered to. And he's saying, I have so much I want to tell you, which the Apostle John, I can understand he probably does. Wrote Revelation, that sort of stuff. I'd be like, okay, I have so many questions. So, hey, let's do this face-to-face meet thing. But John says, I have so much I want to tell you, and I'm not going to put it on paper. I want to come see you face-to-face, so that our joy can be full. It's kind of neat just seeing the heart of the author right there on the page. It's kind of like when Paul writes to Timothy. He calls him his son in the faith and that sort of stuff. Like, Paul had a deep love for Timothy. And I just don't want to miss that part here. He says, the children of thy elect sister greet thee, amen. Again, I believe he's talking about a literal sister here, not a sister church, but it would seem like John probably knew this lady's sister, or at least her sister's children, and they're saying, hey, tell her we said hi. So that's how he ends the book. He says all these things. So he covers, again, the basis of Christian fellowship. He about the love for the truth. He exhorts them to continue walking in the truth. He tells them, it's not so much combating Gnosticism, the ideas of Gnosticism in this book, as it is saying, here's your response to it. He's not really trying to make an argument against Gnosticism, but he's trying to say, here's how we respond to this heresy. That's pretty much what's going on in this book. And again, first of all, make sure that you are abiding in the correct doctrine of Christ. So that's the book of 2 John. I hope that's been a blessing to you, and I hope that maybe you've learned something along the way. I know I did. So maybe it was just me that benefited from this, but I'm glad you let me tell you all about it. So, so let's pray.